Greetings, Earthlings. It's Joel at Earth Tools, and we're going to talk about a Grillo Brand Snow Blade. This is what we bill on our website as the Dozer/Snow Blade, so it's a front mount blade only. We have them available in 32, 40, and 48-inch widths. This is the 40-inch width. This one's actually slightly used, but we're just going to go through a little assembly process here on it, because there's been some questions about how to properly assemble these things and adjust them. So when you get this thing, it's going to be disassembled in a box. The blade will be lying down usually in the box. This mounting assembly on the back, which is what mounts the blade to the tractor, will typically be kind of laying down flat. And two of these fasteners, either these fasteners or these fasteners, will be out. That is, they'll be just like loose in the box, or they might be stuck in these holes here for the handle. And that'll allow this assembly to just fold down flat so it can fit in a smaller box. So anyway, what you'll do is bring this up, take the two bolts and put it in there. I'm pretty sure the bolts that will be out of it are going to be these two here. So these are going to be bolts, nuts, and washers. You're going to run those bolts through from the inside out, and those bolts not only are going to clamp this assembly in place, but they're also going to hold your lever assembly on there, your handle. You got holes here that are going to go over these bolts. Now the other thing is you've got this pin assembly here, which is a spring-loaded pin actuated off this red handle. You can see that it moves the pin in and out. That pin is going to go down into this hole here, and it's going to, the bottom end of the pin is going to drop through one of these holes, and that's what locates the blade in position when you want to cock the blade to the left or right. There's 7 positions total on this thing, 1 in the middle and 3 in each direction. So when you're ready to assemble this handle assembly or lever assembly, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to first get this where it needs to go here. This just screws down into there. You can see the threads here. Make sure it's all greased up real good. Get that centered up. You'll want to get a big wrench and put on here. I don't actually have a big enough wrench for this. A big adjustable wrench will work fine on that, or channel locks, and just tighten that into place to make sure it's good and firm and not going to loosen up on you. And then, of course, I've got these bolts started, but yes, thank you, Ken. Ken is helping me here. Just get that slipped over there. And you can usually stretch this handle out enough to get it over the other bolt. You don't have to take the bolts back out of the holes. So we're going to put these in here and crank them down. Now, these require 22 millimeter wrenches, one on the inside and of course one on the outside. These bolts in the front have nuts that are welded on the inside. You don't have to reach anything down on the inside there. I don't think you can actually see in there, Ken. It's probably too dark. But regardless, these bolts just go in and tighten down with a single wrench because the nut on the inside is actually welded in place. Now, if you notice, this bolt is tightening down on a slot. That slot is a pretty good sized slot, about 20-25 degrees of travel there. That is what allows you to adjust your attack angle on the blade, because this piece here is going to be fit onto your tractor quick coupling, or your PTO flange on the tractor. And then where this gets tightened down is going to control how much forward or backward tilt you've got on the blade. So that controls how aggressive a cutting angle you've got. If you tilt it like this, you've got a very aggressive cutting angle at the bottom of the blade to cut into the material. If you don't want it to be so aggressive, you can tilt it forward and you've got a very mild cutting angle on the bottom. I usually adjust it so it's about in the middle of the slot. And of course, where this is going to put that cutting angle relative to your particular tractor is all depending on the size tires you've got on your tractor. Because you've got big tires, tractor sits higher. Small tires, tractor sits lower. So anyway, just mount it to your tractor, adjust the blade angle to what you want, and crank those bolts down. And you have to crank these things. I mean, these are 14 millimeter fasteners with, as I said, 22 millimeter heads. And you can put at least 100 foot-pounds of torque on these things, and you have to crank them down to get these to hold into place. We've had some people complain. They say, oh, I go out and push and my blade slides forward because it's hitting things on the bottom of the blade and it just eventually kind of knocks the blade forward so it doesn't have much of a cutting angle on the bottom. I'm like, if that's happening, you're not getting the bolts tight enough, because if you tighten these firmly enough to up to 100, 120 foot-pounds of torque, they are not going to move. Same thing is to be said with your fasteners that are holding the lever or the handle in place here. There's no other support for this lever assembly except the tension of those bolts. So what's going to hold this lever up so it clears the top of the tractor is how much tension you've got on these bolts. I've had people call and say, oh, this just falls down on top of my tractor after a half an hour use. I'm like, get the wrenches and make those tighter, because if those are tight enough, it will not fall down. I know this because I've used one of these blades for 15 years. So anyway, you just get your wrenches on there and crank the thing down until it will not move. There's one side, and I'll do the other side in a minute. So anyway, that blade should stay up, or rather that handle should stay up in position like that. And then when the tractor is plugged in here, this is clearing the top of the tractor. It's not laying down on the tractor, it's up above the tractor, and you can just reach forward over the tractor, compress that lever there, which releases your pin at the bottom, and then you just use this lever to move the blade left or right. Now, of course, I can't move it now because this isn't supported by the tractor, but once I push this down, this is able to move, and it locks. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install the whatever kind of coupling is going to make this blade attach to the tractor. So let me explain. The blade comes with a male protrusion built into it, and this is the correct size to fit to a Grillo G85 or G107 series male quick coupling, or rather, sorry, female quick coupling. This is the male, this is the female. So if you already have one of these on your Grillo tractor and you're buying this blade for your Grillo, then no problem. You've already got this, and you just plug this right in, drop this down, and you're good to go. If you're buying this blade to fit another tractor, for example, a BCS tractor, we're going to supply one of these with the blade, and it's going to look like this because we're going to have a BCS male bolted to the back of this female Grillo so that this will interface with your BCS. Now, if you're bolting this onto a tractor directly and you don't have a quick coupling system at all, then you still need one of these, and then we would have another adapter bolted to the back of this with just like a bolt flange on it that would bolt onto your tractor. Well, if it's an old enough tractor, you might just bolt it up direct. You might not need the adapter. It depends on your PTO shaft on your tractor, but we'll determine all that. So the point is, this thing slides together like this. This provides not only a hookup for the blade, but it also provides float so that the blade can float to follow the contours of the ground while you're going forward. For example, if you're plowing your paved driveway and one of your tractor wheels drops in a pothole, you don't want this whole blade to just have to move to the side as well. You want the blade to actually stay flat on the ground. That's why this float is important. Now, there's some times that you don't want that float. For example, if you're using this blade to cut into a dirt hillside and you want to make that sort of prism cut, I'm getting too much weight on the back here, not enough counterbalance, I'll pull that back off temporarily. But anyway, if you want to go along a hillside and kind of make that prism-shaped cut into the hillside, like to cut a path or something like this, so you want one end of the blade actually rotated down into the ground because your tractor wheels are on the hillside. The tractor's tilted. You want your blade to be tilted this way so it's actually cutting in on the one corner and pushing the soil out. Okay, well now you need to lock that blade in position in some rotational fashion. So on this one that I've got here, we've actually done that modification. We've cut a slot up here, we've drilled a hole all the way through this thing. You'll notice that this other one, this is the way they come out of the factory. No slot, no hole. We've made this modification. Slot it, drill it, put a hardened bolt and nut through there, and now when this thing goes on there, one thing we're going to have to do, we're going to have to remove these limiter bolts, because these bolts right here are what normally set the limitation for how far this thing can swivel. So those things have to go away. So if you've bought what we call the locking feature, you will have to remove these bolts. These come installed from the factory, so just get rid of these things because they're going to interfere with that bolt we put through the squeezing mechanism there. Okay, now when you slide this on here, this can swivel all the way around, as you can see. But if we want it to not swivel at all, we take a couple wrenches and we tighten down that nut and bolt right there and just get it as tight as possible, and it will squeeze that coupling down. It'll squeeze the female around the male and lock it in position. And if you want it, you know, if you want the blade oriented up or down on one end, well, you just twist this accordingly and lock it down there. Keep your wrenches in your pocket while you work, and you can adjust it for like coming back the other direction on the slope. You can cock it the other direction, whatever. Now, if you still want some limitation, if you don't want this blade to just freely float on here while this locking feature is loosened, say you want to use it for snow removal too, and you want it to swivel a little bit, but not swivel like way up in the air, you can take a little larger nut and bolt. This is a 10 millimeter bolt with a 17 millimeter nut. You want to use an Allen head bolt. That'll use, I believe, a 8 millimeter Allen wrench. You put that through this slot at the side, and like so, put this in place, and you want to get it oriented right about in the middle of the slot. The slot is slotted up to top to bottom. Get in the middle, tighten it down, and that will provide a little bit of float there when it's all tightened down. You may have to file the paint off of that side there a little bit, but you can see the side of that is flat. So the bolt head basically will rotate, it'll allow a little bit of rotation before it bottoms out top and bottom on that flat. So I'm not going to tighten that fully because this blade is not going with this feature, but regardless, that's the way you're going to limit the float when you've got the locking feature on your blade. We're going to get this thing off of here. Again, you always want to keep some grease on all this to keep it all moving correctly. The next thing is, once you, and I should have mentioned this earlier, once you get this installed, you've got your locking pin assembly here, you can adjust this. Sometimes there's a little adjustment bolt here to adjust the cable tension. I have some wrenches laid out here. Let's see, there they are. So this is a hollow adjustment bolt, just like the adjustment bolt on any bicycle brake or anything like this. To loosen it, to adjust it, you would loosen the jam nut, which is this, and then back out the bolt to increase cable tension. I'm backing it out, which pushes the sheath away from the anchor point, therefore increasing cable tension. Or if I wanted less tension, I would screw this bolt in. I want a little more tension because I don't want a bunch of slop up here. A little bit of slop like that is acceptable. But if it's too sloppy, it wants to derail the cable. So you want to get as much slop out of it as possible. Once you get all the slop adjusted out, just hold the bolt, tighten the jam nut down into place. Now it's all firm. It's good. No slop. We're good. Other thing to know about this blade, I'm going to go ahead and rock it back, is on the cutting edge on the bottom, this particular blade is actually set up with the optional rubber cutting edge. This is reinforced rubber, kind of like a mud flap. Normally what would come on this is a steel cutting bit like this. So these bolts would hold on this steel cutting bit, which is of course replaceable. That's the standard thing that comes on the blade. This particular customer who owned this had upgraded it to the rubber. This is his old steel one. He never actually used it. I'm going to put it back on. But the rubber is for like when you want to plow snow off a wooden deck or something like that, and you don't want the steel tearing into your wood. So or if you're on a rooftop or something like that, where some people actually use these walk-behind tractors with blades on rooftops for pushing off snow up north. And if you don't want to gouge into your whatever roofing you've got, the rubber blade is a very forgiving edge. You can wear out one edge of it, and then when it wears down, you just flip it over and use the other edge until it's worn down. But that's an option that's available for these blades. So should be everything you need to know about the Grillo Brand Snow and Dozer blades. Have fun. Thanks.